Hey, what's good? This is Dismantling the Narrative with CMB 613. Thanks for checking out the channel where we bust open false narratives. If you end up agreeing with what AI me is saying and/or learned something, please like and subscribe. If you disagree, please let me know in the comments what you think I got wrong. Thank you. Now, let's get into this.
Okay, so there's this really intense narrative making the rounds online, and it paints a picture of Britain, well, as a nation on the absolute brink. In this explainer, we're going to break down the source material that lays out this whole vision: a country in crisis, a government with a supposed secret plan, and a people pushed right to the edge. Now, our job here isn't to say if these claims are true or not, but to really get inside the argument itself and understand how it's constructed. So let's dive in. Right, so the central puzzle that these sources want you to solve is this: all the chaos we're seeing across Britain. Is it just a massive government screw-up? Or is it actually part of a deliberate, carefully calculated plan? We're going to unpack the evidence, just as it's presented in this narrative, piece by piece, to see exactly how they build their case. According to this viewpoint, the whole conflict is basically a game with two main players. In one corner, you've got Keir Starmer. The sources label him as a player for the globalist order, using the Human Rights Act as his main strategy. And in the other corner, Nigel Farage, who they paint as the leader of a patriotic movement whose goal is mass deportation with the Royal Navy as his tool of choice. So first up, the narrative needs to set the stage. It presents what it calls a Britain just completely overwhelmed by crime, by uncontrolled immigration, and a total breakdown of society. Let's look at the key numbers it uses to really paint this picture. The story kicks off with a pretty startling figure. The sources claim that machete attacks have just exploded, jumping by 320% since the year 2000. It's meant to show a country where violent street crime is becoming, and I'm quoting them here, the new normal in big cities. Then you have this number, £8 million. This is what's cited as the daily cost to British taxpayers just to put up migrants in hotels. It's a figure that's definitely used to emphasize a huge financial drain on the system. And then there's this one, over 14,000. This is the source's estimate for the number of undocumented migrants who are, quote, lost inside the system. Untraceable, completely unaccounted for. According to this view, they're living in what the narrative calls a shadow state. To really drive home just how fast they believe this breakdown is happening, the sources lay out a timeline from a single night of rioting. It shows how, in their telling, control was just lost in a matter of hours, from the first shop being looted to whole police sectors being declared lost, and all of it being blasted out on TikTok for the world to see. So, this brings us right to the core of the whole argument. The narrative claims this chaos isn't some accident. Nope, it's the intended result of a very specific government plan. At the very heart of this alleged plan is something they call the death tax. Now, the sources define this as a 20% inheritance tax that specifically targets farmers. The idea is that it makes it financially impossible for families to pass their farms down from one generation to the next. And this, the sources claim, kicks off what they call a cynical cycle. Step 1, bankrupt the farmers with this tax. Step 2, the government seizes their land. Step 3, they build 1.5 million new homes on that land. And the final step, the end game according to this narrative, use all that new housing for the huge number of new arrivals they're expecting. A really key part of this whole narrative's emotional punch is the crazy contrast it draws right here. On one side, it shows you British pensioners who can't afford to heat their homes and veterans literally sleeping on the streets. And on the other side, it claims new arrivals are being put up in heated hotels, all paid for by that taxpayer bill of, you guessed it, $8 million a day. Okay, so all of this is leading up to the ultimate claim in this story, that the real goal here isn't about housing or money, it's about engineering a brand new electorate from the ground up to guarantee a permanent hold on power. The entire argument really hinges on demographic data, and here's how the sources interpret it. They point to a shrinking average family size for what they call English families, and they put it right next to a much, much larger average for new arrivals. They use this to argue that a massive demographic shift is happening, and it's happening fast. So this is the crucial part of the whole theory, what they call the 10-year plan. They lay it out like this: a new arrival gets housing today. 5 years down the line, they get a passport and the right to vote. And the conclusion they draw from this, You've just created a brand new voting bloc that's going to be loyal to the party that, in their view, opened the door for them in the first place. And for the people pushing this theory, this quote is presented as the big confession. They take Starmer saying he needs 10 years and they say, see, that's not a plan for the country. That's the exact timeline he needs to pull off this whole demographic and political takeover. But the story doesn't actually stop at the UK's borders. Just when it feels like a purely domestic issue, the narrative introduces this huge external force, claiming that the United States, under a potential Trump presidency, is getting ready to step in directly. The sources lean heavily on what they report as a direct endorsement from Donald Trump. In their telling, this makes Farage not just some guy opposing the government, but the U.S. president's hand-picked choice to, quote, save Britain. And that sets up a dramatic ultimatum. For a Britain led by Starmer, the sources warn of crippling economic tariffs and being treated like a pariah. But for a Britain led by Farage, they promise the #1 trade spot with the U.S. and a massive economic boom. It's basically presented as a choice between total ruin and total rescue. Now, this claim is supposedly backed up by reports of a leaked U.S. doctrine. This document, they say, reveals an official pivot in American foreign policy, moving away from traditional allies like Starmer's government and throwing support behind so-called patriotic movements instead. And finally, the narrative brings us right back to where we started, the streets of Britain. It reframes the protests, saying they aren't just mindless riots, but a conscious, popular uprising, what they call a final stand against a deep and profound betrayal. So who are these people in the streets? Well, the sources are very insistent on this point. They reject the far-right extremist label completely. Instead, they say these are betrayed parents, the working class, farmers who've lost their land, just ordinary people who feel like their own tax money is being used to fund their own replacement. This quote from the source material really gets to the heart of the grievance. It makes the argument that when a government seems to care more about outsiders than its own people, the result isn't loyalty, it's insurrection. It's as simple as that. So the ultimate conclusion that this entire narrative builds towards is incredibly stark, that the fundamental unwritten deal between a government and its people, the social contract, has been completely and totally broken. And that leaves us right back where we started, with the big question this whole story forces you to think about. Are we watching a nation's last desperate stand for its own identity? Or is this just a chaotic, leaderless revolt, the kind of thing that's bound to happen when people feel their government has completely broken its promise? That's the choice the story leaves you with.